Welcome to The Explainer. We love to break down complex stuff here. And today, we're tackling something we have all been through, growing up. We're going to go inside the classroom to see how educators are actually teaching this universal experience. So what are the milestones on the path to growing up? That's the big question, right? It's actually the essential question for an entire 8th grade literature unit called Rites of Passage. I mean, it's one thing for us to figure it out for ourselves, but how do you actually teach that? How do you guide a room full of young people to find their own answers in a way that's, meaningful? And that's the real challenge, isn't it? The journey to adulthood isn't some straight line. It's messy. It's a mix of personal triumphs, super embarrassing failures, and those quiet moments of realization. So what we're going to do is pull back the curtain on a modern curriculum to see the architecture behind teaching this very journey. All right, let's get into it. The whole thing is built around this idea of a question-driven journey. And the starting point, the very core of the unit, isn't an answer. It's that big, open-ended question we just talked about. So the whole point here isn't just to have students read a bunch of stories. It's to give them a framework to find their own answers. And the way they do this is pretty clever. It's called backward design. Basically, the teachers start with the end goal in mind, in this case, a personal essay, and then they work backward to design every single activity, every lesson, to lead right up to that final task. It's a funnel, really, moving from this huge shared question down to a really personal, reflective answer. Okay, so where do you start on a journey like this? Well, you need some guideposts, right? Some landmarks. In this unit, the guideposts are the stories. And these aren't just random stories pulled off a shelf. They are very intentionally chosen to show just how different a rite of passage can look. Take this first one from a story called The Medicine Bag. The narrator is kind of embarrassed by his grandfather because he doesn't look like the TV Indians he's seen in movies. I think we can all relate to that feeling, right? The story really forces students to think about their own family, their culture, and that huge gap between what we think things should be and what they really are. And then, talk about a pivot. They read this piece called You Are the Electric Boogaloo, which is basically a letter someone wrote to their teenage self about a massive public failure trying to breakdance. It's hilarious, but it's also so real. It tells them, hey, those super embarrassing moments, the ones that make your stomach churn, they count. They're part of your story. It reframes failure as just part of the process. And it's not all just about personal internal moments. They also look at really formal, structured ceremonies. They watch a video about an Apache girl's rite of passage, which is this incredible 4-day ritual that's all about strength and endurance. It's a powerful way to show that for some cultures, this transition isn't just something that happens to you, it's marked. And it's celebrated by the whole community. Okay, now this is where you can really see the genius of the curriculum design. Look at this table. It's not just a random collection. You've got a short story about family heritage next to a nonfiction piece about empathy. You've got a video about a formal ritual next to a memoir about personal failure. They're exploring cultural identity through both fiction and poetry. Each one of these is like a different lens, a different angle to look at that same big question. It helps them build a much richer, more complex idea of what growing up means. So they have these amazing, diverse stories to guide them. But how does it all fit together in the classroom? Because it's not just about what they read, it's about how they read it and what they do with it. Let's look at the learning blueprint. The whole unit follows this really smart 3-step path. Think of it like learning to ride a bike. First, everyone's together in a big group, learning the basics, getting their balance. That's whole class learning. Then, the training wheels come off a bit and they work in small groups, helping each other, collaborating. And finally, they're off on their own, choosing their own path with independent learning. It's a deliberate progression from total support to total autonomy. And here's a great side-by-side look at that. In the whole class phase, the goal is to get everyone on the same page, so everybody reads the medicine bag together. They build a common vocabulary for talking about this stuff, but then fast forward to the independent learning phase, and the goal is totally different. It's about personal exploration. So now you get to choose what you read. Maybe it's Maya Angelou, maybe it's Mark Twain. You pick what interests you and then apply all those skills you learned together. Okay, but to really dig into these stories, whether you're working with the whole class or by yourself, you need the right tools. You can't build a house without a hammer and nails, right? In literature, a huge part of that toolkit is vocabulary, having the right words to talk about complex ideas with real precision. And this is so cool. Instead of just giving them a list of words to memorize, which, let's be honest, nobody remembers, they turn the students into word detectives. They teach them to look for clues, specifically word roots. So take a word like construct. They learn that the root, struct, means to build. Suddenly, the word isn't just a random definition. It makes sense. They understand it. And because they understand it, they can use it correctly. And it's not just a one-time thing. The idea is that building your vocabulary is an active, ongoing process. Throughout the whole unit, students create their own personal word network. So as they're reading, they pull out words that stick with them, like protective or gratitude. It becomes this personal collection, their own custom toolkit of words. This not only helps them appreciate the choices authors make, but it also gives them a richer palette to use in their own writing. Okay, so let's recap. We've got this journey through all these different stories. We have this shift from learning together to learning on your own. We have them building this awesome personal vocabulary. Where does it all lead? Well, it's all been building towards one thing, the final project, what they call the performance-based assessment. This is the moment where everything comes together. After all that time spent exploring other people's stories of growing up, the final prompt asks them to turn the lens back around. They have to write a nonfiction narrative answering this big question: what event would you consider a turning point in a young person's life? It could be their own life or just something they've observed. It's their chance to apply everything. And of course, they don't just get thrown into the deep end. They're given a map. To get ready, they take apart a model story, like this one called Red Roses. They break it down piece by piece. The introduction, the rising action, where things get complicated, the big climax, where the main character has a realization, and all the way to the end. By seeing how a professional story is built, they learn how to build their own. And that brings us right back to where we started. What's so brilliant about this is how the curriculum takes this huge, abstract question and step by step turns it into a prompt for real, deep, personal reflection. It gives these students the tools, the examples, and the freedom they need to find and tell their own stories. And it kind of makes you think, doesn't it? What turning point would you write about?